All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast. We are your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. My name is Robert Winfrey, and I am your host, per usual. Well, we got some stuff to talk about this particular week, don't we? UFC 308 is in the rearview mirror, and boy, was that a rough one. Not bad fights. I mean, there were a couple that were less than inspiring, but man, watching that main and co-main back to back just hurt. That just hurt a little bit. Not really another way to phrase that. We also have a card to preview for UFC on ESPN Plus. They'll be in Edmonton for this one, and this will be the first event with the new rules in play. So hopefully all the fighters and referees and everyone are aware, but we'll talk about that a little bit when we preview it, if you'd like. Then a little bit of news. Not much, a little bit of news. So, if you could like, comment, subscribe, star rating, written review, y'all know the drill. Share on your social media platform of choice or with people you know in real life. Whatever you feel is most appropriate. So, thank you all very much for that. I really do appreciate you guys listening. So, thank you. All right, I think that's it for the preamble. Let's jump into this bad boy, shall we? UFC 308 from the Etihad Arena in Abu Dhabi. Saturday morning here. This thing started at 8 a.m. for me, 10 a.m. in the East. How did we do? Prediction wise, 8-5. Which of these do I regret? What do I? Well, I feel bad about the Fakhretdinov one because I don't think he won that fight, but um, I I picked Chris Barnett kind of on a lark. That was just silly. Um, Abus Magomedov over Bruno Ferreira. No, I'll stand by that one. Abus seems to have ironed a few things out. Still got issues, but um, Rembeshki over Orlby. No, I'm okay picking Orlby there. You know, the catch weight should have given that more weight. I still would have gone with Orlby, but Rembeshki without cutting that extra little bit of weight to 155. I mean, Orlby's a big lightweight, but when your primary issue tends to be cardio related, not cutting that last bit of weight is actually very beneficial to your game. So should have given that more weight, personally. But I was okay with the pick. Ankalaev, that's the one I really probably should have got right, was Ankalaev over Rakic. I'll stand by having picked Whittaker, but yeah, that did not play well. So a lot of it was just man, there was only one underdog that cashed. I think the only underdog that won all night was Rembeshki. The odds makers had a good read on things this time around. We also lost one fight. Said Nurmagomedov and who was he supposed to fight? That fell apart. Daniel Santos. Yeah, that fell apart, so that didn't happen. But ultimately, 8-5, which not my best. And frankly, if I'd been smarter, Kennedy Zachukwu and Ankalaev, I probably should have not been silly about. The others, I'll stand by my reasoning for the prediction, even if it was wrong. But those two, so we probably should have been 10-3. But what are you gonna do? I didn't, and that's where we are. So year to date, I am now 304 and 130 with 4-0 contests. Still no draws in the UFC all year. That's a little bit. I know that's not the most likely outcome, but um, I don't know. It is. Let me put it this way. It is slightly weird to me that no contests are statistically more likely than draws. I do find that a little bit odd. But that's just kind of an MMA thing, so who knows. Okay, but that's enough dilly-dallying. Main event. I went back and forth on this one. I said I was going to. I did. I ultimately stuck with Topuria. Um, something about him in the tape study just really made me more confident in that pick. Not hugely confident, but more confident. So the result, Ilia Topuria knocks out Max Holloway. First person to ever do so. He does so in the third round at 134 of the third. This was a really good fight. Doing this live, I was 2-0 Topuria. So were two of the judges. One judge had it 1-1. These rounds were so close, you could go 2-0 either way. On rewatch, I'm more confident in round 2 to Topuria on rewatch. And I'm more understanding of round 1 to Max. Topuria landed a left hook on Max in the second. It was in the first half or so of the round, but it kind of got to him. And Max certainly had the rest of the round still played out very, very close, but there was just enough in that second round on rewatch to make me go, yeah, Topuria. First round, still super close, and as I mentioned, I had to rewatch that one to feel confident in the scoring of the second. You could go 2-0 either way, and I don't think that's wrong. That's how close these rounds were. But the difference here ultimately comes in the third. And there's a few things that start happening in the third that play off of what's already happened that lead to this. I mean, just the recitation of what happens. They both start getting more confident in their trading as the fight goes on. These two guys were willing to throw down from the beginning. Topuria came out and did the point at the middle of the ground thing, and Max no, did the matador thing with the cape. Kind of funny, but setting aside we're just going to do Rock'em Sock'em Robots, both men were willing to engage very, very quickly. Um, this was really good, but Topuria is able to land a really solid right hand in the third round. Hurts Max. I haven't seen Max hurt that much. Setting aside the finish, the right hand that starts everything. I think the last time I saw Max Holloway react that badly to a punch was one of the times in his second fight with Poirier. And it didn't last as long as it did here. Because Poirier hit him at one point in their second fight and would have knocked Max down if the fence hadn't been where it was. Poirier kind of argued it should have been a knockdown. It would have been in boxing. Boxing has... part of that is how boxing scores knockdowns. If you touch the ground with a hand, it's a knockdown, so you don't do that, and Max did. Also, boxing will, if you are held up by the ropes, do the standing 8 count. So if you get hit and you would have hit the ground, but the ropes stop that, and that's the only thing stopping it, they'll give you the standing 8 and count it as a knockdown. Under those considerations, either of them, but even the second, which has some discretion involved, under the second criteria, I would have given Poirier a knockdown against Max in that circumstance. But even then, Max got up fairly quickly from Poirier's and sort of recovered. Here, Topuria's able to get him against the fence because he gets hit and backs into it. Max is very badly hurt. Max's defense when hurt is actually still pretty decent. Goes to a little bit of a Philly shell, and Topuria digs the body because he does that when you're hurt, and that's a very good thing to do when the other guy's hurt. Goes upstairs, but Max does enough blocking and slipping. He still kind of gets, touched a bit there, but he doesn't get hit clean. He's able to circle out. And for a moment, somewhere in your head is, okay, Scary moment, big moment for Topuria, but Max's chin is Max's chin. He's just, he's been in that kind of position more or less before. Circles out, recovers. Topuria didn't really give him that chance. Pushed him back towards the fence again. Missed a few punches getting close, but gets into kind of a tie-up. Not a full-on like chest-to-chest clinch, but we're close enough to be grabbing at the biceps. A little bit of a boxing clinch in that respect. And as he exits that, Topuria just sets an angle, left hook. Max's hands, bless him. I have nothing but admiration for Max Holloway. And he was already hurt, so when I say the following, understand this is not me putting my hands in the air screaming, "What are you doing?" This is the culmination of what's happened. And even the very best fighters have those breakdowns of technique, of positioning, of all of it, when things start going south on them. And when they start going south against someone as sensational as Topuria, even if you're an all-timer like Max, that's not a chance you get back. His hands are a little bit down. I think he was looking at bicep control coming out of the clinch, or he expected Topuria to shoot on him again, because Topuria hit a very nice double leg actually in the first round. But he's mindful of space, and he's mindful of inside space, not mindful of hand position, and that's just one of those trade-offs you almost have to guess at that point. Because if he raises his hands too much, hips are open, you're going down. And Topuria's grappling is... People forget this about him because he started just bodying people. But his grappling was what got him into the UFC. Watch his UFC debut again. He does a lot of grappling and some really good work there too, by the way. So, yeah, Max just already hurt, caught a little bit in space. Topuria separates when I don't think he was expected to by Max. Finds a really nice angle and left hook that Max doesn't see coming, right on the chin. Powerful punch and just floors him. A few more hammer fists on the ground. All she wrote. Just incredible performance out of Ilia Topuria. I got a few different things to talk about as it relates to this, so I apologize if this one goes a little bit long on this subject, but this I find very interesting, and so I'm going to talk about it for a minute or two. What started things going sideways for Max in the third, and I don't know... I'm going to present this as like what happened, but I'm not trying to present the choice made as some giant mistake. It's a choice. Some choices are clearly mistakes. Some are just choices you make. Because Max does a little bit of... He's always been a little bit bistantial, right? He switches stances. And he's not quite as good out of... For the sake of conversation... is he equally talented out of both stances? Well, no, he's got one that he's better out of. Most people do, even if you can move between them. You got one that you're just better at. Max is just so good out of both that most of the time, the tendencies from one or the other don't have hugely negative consequences. If you want to understand, like, switching for no reason and immediately being punished for it. This is from boxing, but it's the starkest example I can think of. Rewatch for as long as it lasts the boxing match between Francis Ngannou and Anthony Joshua. When operating out of orthodox, Ngannou's not nearly the boxer Joshua is, but he's able to hold it together for a little bit there. He goes southpaw. I don't know why. But he does. And like 2 seconds later, Joshua crushes him with a right hand. Because Ngannou's defense out of southpaw is not what it is in orthodox. It's certainly not what it is in boxing versus MMA. That's a broader category problem. And he got away with that against Tyson Fury because, one, Tyson Fury will switch with you, and two, Tyson Fury does not punch as hard as Anthony Joshua. Joshua ended him over that. That's I'm not saying it would have gone any different if Francis had stayed orthodox the entire time. I think Joshua was always going to win that fight. But do I think it might have lasted a little bit longer and maybe would not have been quite as violent? Maybe. And for MMA purposes, so switching gears, but like that's what happens when you switch and you don't know why, or the other guy's very just I'm very good out of this stance. I don't care what stance you're operating out of. That can go bad for you in a hurry. Now, Max is absolutely world class out of both stances. In fact, I think that was one of the most impressive things about both his back-to-back fights with Jose Aldo. Because he did a fair amount of stance switching. Like he fought him circling one way and one, circling the other way and the other, and he did more stance switching, I think, in the second. Uh, Max is just very, very good out of both stances, but there's trade-offs. And initially, when Max switches, he opens up the power leg and he fires a couple of body kicks that actually kind of land, and he goes back. But he starts showing that okay, I'm now going to start switching. Most of the first two rounds, he's orthodox. Any switching he does in the course of that first 10 minutes is mostly in service of movement, not in service of engaging. And those are two very, very different things. I am personally of the opinion that everyone should know how to move well enough out of both stances because being able to move around your area, switching, just being mindful of what you're doing, it can actually free up a lot of how you want to move. So even if you don't like fighting out of both stances, you should know how to move in both stances. Fighting out of southpaw for Max, he's had success there, but he's got... This is true for Max out of both stances. Max is a very weird guard a lot of the time. Now, I say weird simply to mean non-conventional. And your guard is almost never the same the entire fight. You move it around, you hand fight, you play up and down. Depending on range, you might change it. Like, a lot of considerations. But Max, anytime he starts to get into engagement range, even kicking range, both his hands will be up, but they will be out, and they're almost even. Normally you got one hand forward. Max, without really shifting his shoulders too much, they're a little square. His hips aren't, but his shoulders do square a little bit. He puts his hands both out, and they're both kind of about the same distance. So like level on the same like plane of glass almost, right? Now, not identical, but that's kind of what he does with them. He does it to hand fight. He does it to parry, which he does a lot of. That's always been a thing he does. But in particular, Max will parry with his backhand, especially dealing with your jab. Now, that's not a bad thing. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. It's the spacing that leaves... This sounds like I'm being like hypercritical of Max, and I'm not. I'm just trying to explain. When you try to parry and intercept as far away from you as he does, you can disrupt punching lanes, and there's a lot of value to that. The trade-off is if you miss those, you're really reliant on your head movement or your footwork to mitigate the fact that something heavy is flying at your head. And Max has been hit a lot in general. I mean, the official stat was that it took like over 2,000 significant strikes to finally knock out Max Holloway. That's his UFC run. I don't know that they've gone back and added up all the strikes he took in the 4 fights before he got to the UFC. Which is absurd. Like, it took a long time. That's a lot of years. Max has been in the UFC, like, what, 12 years? Which is, again, a ridiculous time. And he's fought guys with insane power. He fought Conor. He fought Dustin twice. Justin Gaethje. Jose Aldo twice. I could go on and on. He's fought people who have serious power. And eventually the dam just breaks. I mean, that happens for everybody. But part of the reason he had absorbed so many of those strikes was, one, he actually had Max's chin is all time. I'm not even remotely kidding about that. That man has an all-time chin. 2,000 strikes before you get knocked out the first time. I mean, somebody else brought up the comparison because people have been lauding appropriately, Max, how long it took for this to happen to Max. And somebody brought up, look at how long it took Anderson Silva to get knocked out. And in fairness, it took a lot of years for Anderson Silva to be knocked out, at least in the UFC. But if you look at the number of strikes it took to get Anderson Silva to be knocked to the first time, so when Chris Weidman knocks him out, right? It only took like, I shouldn't say only, but it was 900 something. Max has absorbed like more than double that before he finally got put down. Insane durability. But to the point about his guard, it leaves you that opening. And it can be hard to hit you when you have that kind of thing going, especially if you're good about your hand fighting. And Max is obviously good about his hand fighting in general. But that's the trade-off. Max does that a lot more, partially because he's a long guy. If he were the much shorter guy, or he was dealing with a serious reach deficit, I think he would go about that a little bit differently, is my hunch. But he's fighting in the weight class he's fighting, and his frame is what his frame is. So he chooses to fight the way he chooses. And, as previously mentioned, not wrong, just trade-offs, because nothing's perfect. Topuria's jab actually got a fair amount of work going. So did Max. It's like these two guys both were landing on each other. There's a really salient tweet from was it Sadikov? They put it up on screen after the first round, and it said these two guys are something to the effect of these two guys are so good they're making each other look vulnerable, which is a really elegant way of framing that. It's not just that they're good, because they are, but we both know how good these guys are, and when you can feel the danger, when you watch the fight and both fighters look vulnerable and you know they're good, and this is not like nubby guys, and I don't say that with disrespect, but you watch two guys who are in there for like the third time, they don't look the same, as they both look vulnerable, but for different reasons than Max and Ilia looking vulnerable against each other. Wildly different things. But though that hand fighting and that parrying that Max does did open him up to get hit on occasion. And in close, there was some interesting footwork from both guys. Ilia a bit more likely to plant and throw. Max, actually the first time Max got tagged with a right hand, he was doing a weird like lunging attack. It wasn't a Superman punch. It was just kind of a weird attack. But ultimately, this winds up being kind of his undoing. He's unorthodox, and one of the other really impressive things about Topuria, he will deceive you about the distance with his weight. A lot of the times, if he's moving, it's a little bit more forward. Then when he gets into, okay, now we're going to feint and make subtler shifts, it goes back. So more weight's on a little bit on the back leg, and he's not like bent back horribly, but lean back a little bit. I think in boxing, I'm talking about like A-framing with your legs, right? A little bit of that, and it's enough to deceive you about the distance. So when he shifts his weight forward, he doesn't have to move his feet to get into punching range, and that got to Holloway a little bit. So the final thing, again, what starts all this, big right hand. Max starts orthodox. I think he has a bad read on the distance in this exchange. And this is another thing, like your understanding of distance will shift. Sometimes you might have a good read on it most of the fight, and then something happens, or just one circumstance, and you're a little bit off. And that happens all the time. I think in that moment, he wasn't quite sure of the distance because Topuria gets closer. Not just weight shift. He actually does step and kind of, lunge is a strong word, but for want of a better expression, kind of lunges forward. I believe Max thinks he has just a little bit further than he does to react. He goes to step through into southpaw in reverse. So he's like stepping back into southpaw out of orthodox. And his lead hand, which is now his backhand as he's stepping, goes to reach and parry, and he misses. And Topuria's left hand, I think, was like stripping the right hand already. And again, because Max's hand is so far forward, that's a bit easier to do. And Topuria, I don't know if he anticipated the step back into southpaw or if he was just moving that direction anyway. But because Max steps back to southpaw, Topuria winds up with outside foot position on the dominant angle. His parry has missed with what would be his backhand now, so there's nothing blocking his head. And because his feet aren't planted, and because he's stepping, when you step through, you're not as mobile most of the time, sort of depending on how you step, but given this is just a step through. And that right hand just right on the button, just cracks into Max, and he never gets back on his feet. Well, he never gets his legs back under him necessarily. And the left hook out of the pocket, just brutal from Topuria. So yeah, Topuria's foot feinting with his weight is. I was talking with my friend Pat about this, and his big takeaway was uh, it was the boxing fundamentals of Topuria 1 out. Max has occasionally done the I'm the best boxer in the UFC thing, and I love Max. And Max is more than smart enough to know that boxing is not punching. And that's why I kind of disagree with him a little bit. Also, MMA boxing is not. There's stuff you just do differently between the two sports because they're different sports. But there's a lot of what Max does that doesn't really work in boxing, or even in a boxing context. So even boxing for MMA, it struggles. A lot of what makes Max's game work is, believe it or not, his kicking. Um, his kicking game opens up a lot of his punching game, and it's something he learned, believe it or not, from Conor McGregor. Because that's what, if we're just talking hands, Max, in their first fight with Max and Conor wins fairly, but in just the punching, Max gives Conor a few problems. Max starts losing that fight when Conor starts kicking him. When Conor starts using kicks to the leg and the hip and the knee to steer him around, to disrupt him, and to feel out the range. And Max learned from that very craftily and absolutely added more of that to his game. He had kicks before that fight. I really don't mean to imply that he never kicked anyone before that. But his kicks before that weren't as tactical. He'd throw a spinning back kick. That thing's been in his arsenal forever. Or, he'd show the high kick on occasion. But the really nuanced elements of kicking, again, the steering, the chipping, the distracting, that was something that he, I think, saw and felt demonstrated when he fought Conor, and something he worked very hard to employ and did so to tremendous effect. But it's why some of his boxing doesn't quite work the way it would in like straight boxing. Both guys actually with some interesting kicking decisions here. Max came out and did a little bit of what Volkanovski did early, showed the lead leg a lot. Topuria settled that with calf kicks. Topuria's calf kick is nasty. Max started using the kind of the Savate sachet, which is not really all that different. It's a back leg side kick. So when I say the Savate sachet, I'm talking about a style in which he throws it, not it's a back leg side kick. There's no fundamental distinction between that or the Sanda side kick or even a karate side kick off the back leg. These are just There's really only one way to do it. The mechanics only work one way. But if you watch enough of it, you can see the people who do it with the kind of Savat flair or the Sanda flair, which are very similar, but I can't even explain it. It's one of those things that after you see it enough, you just recognize. Like, oh, that guy learned that kick in Sanda. That guy learned it in Savat. I don't know where Max learned it in particular. It reminds me more of the Savat one. But he used that a lot against... Um, he used a lot against Yair. A lot against Yair Rodriguez, actually. I think he used it a fair amount in the second Volkanovski fight. No, the first one. He showed it more in the first one. The second one, he actually did more of a Muay Thai thing. But he's used it before. He just started bringing it out again here. He didn't throw it much against Gagey. Little bit against Allen. Almost none against the Korean Zombie, but he brought it back out here and had some success with it. In the third round in particular, he landed a couple of really nice ones to the lead leg of Topuria. Not too long before Topuria really cracked him with that right hand, but so he started doing that, and when he went southpaw, it was mostly to open up the back leg kick because his jab out of southpaw, it can be good, but I think Topuria was very ready. I think Topuria was waiting for Max to show southpaw because he was having success against orthodox Max, but I think he was very well prepared for southpaw Max. I don't know if he thought Max might come out southpaw to begin with, or if he was just, at some point he's going to switch, and I want to really be ready for that because that will provide me opportunities that I won't necessarily get orthodox to orthodox. So my hunch might be the latter, but because he landed on Max a fair bit orthodox, but he couldn't find anything like seriously powerful. I say seriously powerful. He wobbled Max with a left hook. I don't, but the switch to southpaw for Max, it's not that it didn't bear fruit, but that some of the trade-offs he had to deal with were ultimately catastrophic. Yeah, so Topuria's foot feinting. His hand fighting's pretty good. His jab is good. His calf kick's nasty. His willingness and ability to mix things up. I mean, he got Max down. That's not an easy thing to do. He didn't keep him down for very long, but he got him down, then hit a mat return, then got the back briefly at the end of the first. Just a really, really good performance from Topuria against a guy who was giving those first two rounds, man, nip and tuck, giving as good as he got, man. Just really, for a fight that only went a little bit into the third, this is a fight of the year. This fight rules. It wasn't fight of the night, which I understand. I really do. But man, this was a good fight. This was a really good fight. There's so many adjustments. There's so much decision making. Just an exceptional piece of business from both gentlemen. My hat is off to them. Good fight. Really good fight. And Topuria, I said it in the preview, your weaponry is only as good as the delivery system, and Topuria's delivery system for his power is insane. I don't know if he's the hardest puncher 145 has ever seen. It's kind of between him and Connor at the top, because Connor at 145 had he hurt everyone he hit, which is kind of crazy. Now, Connor's power was generated more by precision and timing, by his own admission, but still, he had it. Josh Emmett, serious power, but delivery system again. I don't know that Topuria is straight up the hardest puncher if we just, stick him in front of the machine, say hit the machine and get the number to come out. But Topuria's power is absolutely up there, and more importantly, his ability to deliver it to the target is so good. Footwork, angle changes, combination work, up and down, kicks to distract, takedowns to distract, body work when you won't give him the head. And a willingness and ability to get into a fight and to just drop bombs on you. Uh, Precision bombs. He does not just swing. He misses a fair bit. Any professional fighter does, man. If you're a professional fighter and you hit 50% of the time, you are almost a god. Like, it's ridiculous if you can do that consistently. Nobody can. So when I say accurate, it's not like he never misses, but his ability to get to the target and consistently. He's not just one and done. This wasn't just one and done on Max. This took some work, and he got there. And that's just, doing that to Max, ridiculously impressive. Just ridiculously impressive. Watching Max be sad after this, that was hard to watch a little bit because I love Max. Max is great. And Max did not make any excuses. He's saying all the right things. Just another reason to respect him. But I've mentioned this before. I have watched every one of Max Holloway's UFC fights. I have covered. I'm pretty sure. If I haven't covered literally all of them, I have covered all but like two. I'd have to go back and double check. So I have watched that guy go from like a 19 or 20-year-old showing up on short notice to fight Dustin Poirier at featherweight, to an all-time great, to the first time he fell like this. And it's rough, and it's rougher because Max is such a good guy. You know, even fighters that are exceptional talents, if they're kind of terrible people, it doesn't hurt quite the same. There's still something profoundly moving about watching greatness fall, even if they're dirtbags. But watching greatness start to fall when they're good, when it's a good person, is another level of like, ow, kind of hurts. This is somewhat mitigated for me because by Topuria being so good. You know, this isn't watching someone who, Max is not washed. I might sound like I'm eulogizing him, and I'm not. But, watching the once great guys fall to people who you know that they would just run over with one hand in their prime, and I've seen a few fighters go down that road. That hurts more almost because, you losing to that guy. There's absolutely zero shame in losing to Ilia Topuria because he's exceptional. He has put to bed the previous era of featherweight. Daniel Cormier I think it was either like right before they closed out or at a post-fight analyst desk thing, said, "This is the equivalent of somebody having come into the UFC, then beating like me and John Jones back to back and knocking us both out." And that's not an inaccurate comparison, just to understand it. It's really not an unfair. The two best guys in that weight class, two of the best, not just the two best guys in the weight class, two best guys in the weight class who also happen to be two of the best to ever do it at that weight class, still very, very, very good. Max Holloway not washed, Volkanovski not washed when this happened to them. I rewatched that fight between Volk and Ilia, and Volk does really good. I thought he won the first round. It just wasn't sustainable. But going in and doing, like, that's what he did. That's what Ilia Topuria has done. Absolutely incredible. So, this to me, hands down, makes Ilia Topuria the fighter of the year for 2024. You knock out Volkanovski at featherweight where he had never lost, and then you become the first guy ever to knock out Max Holloway. That is... It's difficult to put into perspective how difficult that is, what mountain he just climbed. with that. That's insane. I have nothing but respect for Alex Pereira, and he's had 4 title fights in a 12-month period. Only 3 of them have been in 2024, and because I go January to December of the year, his first one is not part of my consideration. Straight up. Not being mean about it. And I mentioned, I think previously, if I had an MVP trophy, like who's the most valuable fighter for the UFC right now in 2024, that would be Pereira, easily. But what Topuria did, definitively knocking out the two of the 3 best this division has ever produced, when they're still near their very best. I mean, that's insane. That is just a more, and stopping them both, that's more impressive than Pereira beating, what, Yuri, Hill, and Roundtree. That's a more difficult feat. It's a more impressive feat. He was fighting. No 2 of those guys at light heavyweight have the skill of either Volk or Holloway. Not trying to be mean to those gentlemen, but if we're just talking technical skill, you would need 2 of them to try and equal the technical ability of either Volk or Holloway. Because Yuri's a wild man and pursues the fight, and God bless him, but he doesn't have defense. Jamal Hill, I don't know what happened. I don't know, and Roundtree can't wrestle. That's an exaggeration, but there's just that there's not really much of a comparison in terms of level of opposition between those 2, and especially since Topuria finished Holloway, he's number 1. Pereira's a strong second place in this category for me. And as previously mentioned, him doing what he did on the timetable that he did, under the circumstances that he did it, bailed the UFC out almost. And that deserves consideration. I respect it. He would be the MVP, but he is not Fighter of the Year. Not after this. Seems the UFC seems to indicate that they're looking to make Volkanovski versus Topuria next. I like Volk. Please don't do that to him. I would much rather watch Topuria and Diego Lopez, if I'm being honest. I don't really want to watch Topuria and Makhachev right now. I'm not saying never, but right now, I want to see the Lopez fight. I really, really do. You've got Evloev and Sterling potentially. Dude, Sterling's reaction. A lot of fighters, they do here's the watch along, get our reaction to the fights thing. Sterling was one of them for this one. His reaction to this was a little bit telling. Like, he knows more so than most how difficult that was. We got to see the fighters cage side reacting to this was nuts. I mean, Volkanovski couldn't believe it. Kyle Bahalio has his hands like not over his face, but like up in the air behind his head. Like, what the heck did I just watch? So they're looking at Volk next. There's just work to do at featherweight before I would be interested in seeing Topuria move up. And it's not like Makhachev doesn't have actual lightweights. I don't need him to get a 3rd title defense at the expense of a featherweight. I just don't. So let Makhachev do some actual work at 155, see if he's talked about maybe wanting to move up, so who knows. But at a bare minimum, let's get a couple of more, not that this wasn't stupidly impressive. And the number of people coming out doing I can't imagine anyone beating him. I understand that sentiment. I really do. I've had it for other fighters in the past. It is never correct. Almost never correct. To say so-and-so is unbeatable. I would favor Topuria over pretty much everyone else in that division. I really do. But I think pretending that Volkanovski has no chance to beat him is ridiculous. I don't favor him. Overlooking Diego Lopez is not something you should ever do. Diego Lopez is a handful. And featherweight just has things in place. I don't need to see Topuria move up right now. Max, I do think I would like to see move up. I think he put on a fair amount of muscle for the Gagey fight. He made championship weight here, so clearly the cut's not impossible, but I don't know what else there is to accomplish at 145 for him. And not just in the sense that I don't know if he'll never be champion again. I mean, look, would he and Diego Lopez be a glorious fight? Yes, it would, but why? Max is at that. He's only 32, I know, but he's been in the UFC for over a decade. That's just a fact. I would like to see him move up, and I would like to see him take. I don't mean to say like fights that don't matter. I don't need to see him go through the meat grinder at 155. So pick relevant fights, but if he gets to a title shot, okay. But you know what I'd really like? This is going to have to wait and see how another couple of fights play out, but years ago at featherweight, there was a fight I was very much looking forward to. It involved Max Holloway, believe it or not. And unfortunately, this fight ended in the first round due to a neck injury. It was Max Holloway and Charles Oliveira. Now, this was a while ago. How long ago was that, actually? I want to look that up specifically, because I remember that because I was very excited for that fight. I really was. Yeah, this was 2015, August of 15. So, over 9 years ago. Don't know why this is listed as an esophagus injury. I don't know, maybe it's a neck injury to Holloway, to Oliveira. Ends the fight, like, we're 100 seconds in. It's 139 of the first. And I really wanted to see that fight. You know what? It's 9 years later. Up at 155. I'd still really want to see that fight. So, got to see what happens between Oliveira and Chandler and a few, like, what else Makhachev might do. There's still things up in the air, right? But tell me that the rematch between Holloway and Oliveira isn't an exceptional fight. You can't tell me that's not an exceptional fight. As I mentioned, Topuria looks like it's going to be a Volkanovski rematch, which that's just not really the fight I want right now, but we'll see what happens. Topuria is the man. Give that man his flowers. He has been... Dude, Paddy Pimblett watching this and going after the fact, going, yeah, I still think I'd knock him out. I can't wait for him to come back up to 155. Just, my man, no. That fight was a mismatch the first time it got floated. He's better now, and your defense is still non-existent. Just no. Just no. All right, that was a long time talking about that one fight, but boy, it was great. Sad as I am for Max, it was a really good fight for the, 12 minutes or so it lasted. Co-main event. Ooh, I was wrong about this one. Khamzat Chimaev submits Robert Whittaker with a face crank. First round, actually. What was it? 4-something? No, 3:34 of the first. Chimaev comes out. Whittaker lands a kick, bit of a jab, and Chimaev with his low double leg switches to a single, gets Whittaker down, and just moves back and forth. Ride, mat return, land a few little punches, and then grabs the face crank, and Whittaker taps immediately. Video of this, some pictures of this got shown after the fact. Like the three of Rob's lower teeth just pushed way back under his tongue. He says it's not a broken jaw. I don't know that we have the medical half of that yet. But he's saying that he's had kind of these teeth injuries for a while, that it stems from childhood incident. Okay. If that's true, this is not as bad as I was worried. If this was the broken jaw that led to that, then I would have some very serious questions about the necessity of Whittaker's return to fighting. If this is a long lingering injury that was just exploited here, I'm a little more understanding of it, but I don't think we have the full diagnosis. We have a few of the different, medical people on YouTube and whatnot who do like breakdowns of these kinds of things, assuming the jaw's broken. Because the teeth look like they're still together and it looks like they're still anchored into something, right? They're not just floating loosely. It's like, if you've ever seen a bridge, right? It looks like that. Just very much out of line with the rest of his jawline. You can find the picture online if you're so inclined. And if that's a thing that Whittaker's just been dealing with for a long time, then, well, one, that's kind of disturbing. But two, if this had been like badly broken jaw, that's that might have gotten me to the point where I would be saying I don't know if he should be fighting again, to be honest. I've Robert Whittaker, another guy whose entire UFC career I covered. I covered his win of that season of The Ultimate Fighter that he won. I watched his first fight after that when he beat up a guy that he beat the crap out of Colton Smith. Um, I remember being skeptical about his move up to middleweight. He shut me up. Uh, I just if that injury had been that bad, and frankly it might still be, I don't know, but if it's a severe injury, I would have serious questions about whether or not um, this is a thing he should continue doing. If it's not, I'm a little bit more amenable to him potentially returning, but we'll see. As I mentioned, I don't think we have a legitimate medical update yet. We have Whittaker talking about it, and that's not nothing, but also not quite the same. This should get Chimaev a title shot in all likelihood. The UFC still seems like they're looking at Strickland and Duplessis. I'd honestly be more interested in Strickland and Chimaev. I don't know who Duplessis would fight then, though. Um, Doing this to Robert Whittaker is crazy impressive. And if Chimaev, there's a little bit of a thing about Chimaev though, and it's just that he is geographically limited in where he can fight, where he can go. That's going to be a bit of an albatross until that gets resolved one way or another. I don't know exactly how that can be resolved, but until it is, that's going to be kind of a thing that they have to deal with because he can't get into the U.S. apparently, and I imagine that's not the only place he can't get into. So there's still some complications there, but if he just winds up waiting for the winner of Duplessis and Strickland too, okay, but probably should get the next title shot. His next fight should be for a belt. Assuming the logistics can line up and assuming he can stay healthy. That not a lot there to talk about. Light heavyweight next. Magomed Ankalaev. We'll try to go faster through the rest of these, I promise. Magomed Ankalaev defeats Alexander Rakic for unanimous decision, 29-28 across the boards. Just a fairly solid all-around performance from Ankalaev. Pretty good movement, landed better punches, good clinch work. Rakic, for a big guy who's got a lot of violence potential, just doesn't. That injury in the Blachowicz fight really seems to have messed him up. And I don't mean the movement. Like, he's still physically able to move, but it really threw off his development in a very obvious way at this point, I think. And then the fact that he came back and was just like, hey, Yuri Prochazka, hey, Magomed Ankalaev, like, he maybe should have had tried to come back a little bit softer if at all possible. Ankalaev should get the next shot at Pereira, otherwise, what are we doing? He is the most deserving contender, and it's not really all that close. And while I respect his game, and I think you'd be very foolish to ignore his chances, I don't know that I would favor him to beat Pereira. Featherweight Lerone Murphy beat Dan Ige via unanimous decision, 29-28. Good first round from Ige, came out very hot. I think he dropped Murphy at one point, but rounds 2 and 3, Murphy just settles things. Keeps it a more technical fight. There's some really nice scrambles here, actually. Ultimately, what seals it for Murphy in the third, because Murphy clearly takes the second. Third round is back and forth, but the time that Ige spends in control on the mat doesn't lead to much, whereas Murphy tries to put more offense into his positions, and ultimately that was enough to sway things. Good win for Murphy. And I feel bad for Dan Ige. That guy can't buy a decision for love or money. If you look at, I think he's lost like 7 of his last 8 fights that have gone the distance. So if we count his last few fights, so Calvin Kattar decision, Jung, Emmett, Movsar, Mitchell, Lopez, and Murphy. Yeah, all those decisions. The last time he won a decision, he beat Nate Landwehr via unanimous decision. That was in 23. Then he had 2 splits before that in 2020 over Bektic and Barboza. But yeah, that's a really bad track record of going to the judges recently. That's real bad. Murphy should absolutely get a ranked fighter. I think he called out Josh Emmett. Perfectly reasonable call out. Very good fight. That gets my seal of approval for whatever it's worth. And kicking off the pay-per-view card, Shara Magomedov hit a sick double spinning back fist on Armen Petrosyan, 4:52 of the second. He throws one, so orthodox, throws the right spinning back fist and it's blocked. Waits half a beat, and then, because he's turned, throws the left spinning back fist, that lands flush and drops Petrosyan. Petrosyan actually does really good work the first half of the first round. He doesn't feint. And that is a really big problem. He does a lot of jousting, a lot of crashing, and that means you can be timed and countered, and Magomedov just kind of started building on that. Magomedov's defense is still kind of weird. I'm still not a huge believer in his. He's getting very favorable matchmaking. And I don't mean that he's fighting guys about his level in terms of experience in the UFC. I mean, they are not giving him people who are going to fight him on terms other than the ones he wants. And I just think that needs to be said. This was a great knockout. And whatever my thought on some of the matchmaking, this was a beautiful knockout. It's going to go on my knockout of the year list somewhere in all probability. This was great. Okay, then on the prelims, Ibo Aslan comes out hot, stops Rafael Cerqueira. I think that's how that was pronounced. Yeah, I believe it was Cerqueira. 51 seconds of the first round with punches. Just lands a good one, gets him against the fence, barrage. Jeff Neal and Rafael dos Anjos only fought for 90 seconds, and then RDA had a knee injury. Neal had dropped dos Anjos before this. Neal was fighting very well. I mean, it's hard to analyze only 90 seconds. Neal was fighting very well. And then something gave out in RDA's knee, and really unfortunate for him. Mateusz Rembeszki and Miktabek Oralbai fought at a catch weight of 160, and they fought to a split decision. I disagree with this, by the way. Not Rembeszki winning, which he did. Uh, the judge who gave Oralbai the third, no. This is your fight of the night. This is a bloody back and forth war. First round, Rembeszki, he swells up Oralbai's eye. Second round, Oralbai seems to get things going a little bit more. He's able to land good shots. Third round, Oralbai nearly gets finished. Then perseveres. You have to hit that guy with a rock or something to get him out of there. I mean, the ref could have stopped this, in fairness, and it would have been perfectly understandable. Chose not to because who was the ref in this one? Shaolin Ribeiro, right? Vitor Ribeiro, I think. And he'll just let you die. But Oralbai endures this absurd. This was your bloodbath of the night too. Both guys cut up, bleeding all over the place by the end of it. Oralbai's right eye pretty much swollen shut. Cut on the right eyebrow of Rembeszki, under the right eyebrow. Great fight, blood and guts. Look this one up if you didn't see it. Oralbai makes a comeback enough at the end of the third to not be 10-8'd, in my opinion. Not enough to win back the round. That's my big gripe with the split. I don't understand giving Oralbai the third. I just don't. Not when you nearly get finished like that. You can come back enough to not get a 10-8. That's possible. Coming back to win the round under those circumstances, you have to nearly finish the guy the same way he nearly finished you, and he did not. Middleweight, Albus Magomedov defeated Bruno Ferreira with an arm triangle choke, 3:14 to the third. Ferreira lands a couple of punches, but he was just not really ready for the wrestling. Magomedov still faded down the stretch, but not as badly as he has in the past. Kennedy Nzechukwu defeated Chris Barnett via TKO. He landed a nice knee to the body, but Barnett's left leg got injured. There's some video evidence to indicate he might have started a minor injury process doing the big, jump squat and stomp the ground when you're announced. He himself claims that he didn't really feel it until he threw a wheel kick. And that's when he really felt it. My hunch is there was something that might have started, because the way he lands on that stomp, just not ideal. But if he says the injury didn't really become a problem until he threw the wheel kick and something kind of got tweaked in there, I believe him. You can absolutely tell that's the point at which his mobility is severely compromised. If it was compromised before that, it was basically not noticeable. After that, things go really bad for him. And then, nobody's even helping him down the stairs after the fight. Just, ugh. Feel bad for the guy. Nzechukwu was fighting more than well enough to give you extreme confidence he was going to win anyway. But it does bear noting the injury played a role there. Nzechukwu still fought. Looks like heavyweight might be the place he needs to be for the moment. Still have to see how his chin holds up when people start throwing back at him, but he looked good for as long as this lasted. He definitely deserves that credit. Farid Basharat and Victor Hugo fought at featherweight because Victor Hugo got to weigh-ins that day, weighed 145, and said, yeah, I can't make anything lower. So Basharat weighed in at 137, and they made it featherweight. Basharat wins 30-27, 229-28. Decent all-around performance from Basharat. At middleweight, Ismail Narudiev defeated Bruno Silva via unanimous decision, 30-27. Bruno Silva just looked a little lifeless in this fight, if we're being honest. Narudiev had kind of the fire, and Silva just didn't have it for whatever reason on this night. Narudiev wins kind of everywhere. And in our weird decision of the evening, to kick everything off, Rinat Fakhretdinov defeats Carlos Leal via split decision, 229-28 and a 30-27. The 30-27 has people a little bit up in arms. I think it was the third round at a minimum that I just don't think you can give to Fakhretdinov. I gave Leal 2 and 3. You could. I'm not up in arms over the second. There's stuff about the second round that I think is close enough that I can squint and see it. And I gave the first to Fakhretdinov. I don't know that I would on rewatch. I haven't rewatched this fight. This got notable because nobody thought Fakhretdinov won, apart from the judges. Not a single media outlet scored this for him. No one on Twitter scored this for him. Just nobody. Nobody thought he won this fight. And you can throw me in that camp. I did not score this fight for him. It goes down as a win on my prediction tracker, but and look, man, Carlos Leal was just the worst case of back knee I've ever seen. It was so bad it was on his front too. Just swimming in steroids or some kind of PEDs. But Leal fought really well, and this is like the third fight in a row that Fakhretdinov has won, but has not looked very good in. You could argue he lost the Dalby fight. Can't remember how I scored that, but that one was close enough that I don't think either way was wrong. Kind of got lucky with the draw against Dos Santos. I think I scored at a draw. I have to double check that though. Sorry, I have to double check which round I went 10-8 in. And this fight, I don't think he won. Just being honest. It's still going to stay on the spreadsheet as a win for me, but what do I think? Because that only counts what actually happened. What do I think happened? I think Leal won this fight. And yeah, that was it. I mentioned already, your fight of the night was Rimbeski and Orolbai. Deserved. Performances, not surprisingly, go to Ilia Topuria, Khamzat Chimaev, and Shara Magomedov. That all tracks for me, if we're being honest. The other four finishes on the prelims, none of them were as good as the main card finishes. So, and that's just how it is. I already mentioned it, but yeah, fights I recommend looking up. Main event, Rimbeski and Orolbai. Murphy and Ige for some fun scrambles. And you can just look up the finish to Magomedov and Petrosian, and the rest of that it wasn't bad, but it wasn't really it wasn't really all that interesting. Yeah, that's it. So full report is over in the MMA Zone of 411mania.com. Y'all know where to find that. Give it a read if you're so inclined. I always appreciate all of the support you guys are able to give me. All right, on that note, let's start moving on to UFC on ESPN Plus 104. All right, so you get to listen to me. Adjust my spreadsheet a little bit there. Okay. And there we go. Okay, that's all set. So this will take place, I mentioned already, but they're at Rogers Place, Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and will be the first time we get the new rule set in play. So if you're curious about the new rules, the two major ones are, one, they allow 12-6 elbows now, thankfully. You still can't hit the back of the head, and there's going to be some people somewhat confused about this. The targeting has not changed, but the 12-6 elbow is now thumbs up. Perfectly fine. So that's a good thing. The definition of a downed fighter has changed. You now need a knee down, or to be on your seat, something like that. But if both your feet are on the ground, hands don't matter anymore. So there's several positions that we've seen people use in the past to just, hey, put my fingers down, and that means you can't knee me in the head. That's going away. You need a knee down to be downed, at least a knee, but flat on your back, like all the other usual caveats. But if all you have is a hand, even if, or both hands, nope. Your head is fair game to be kicked or kneed. So those rules are in play for this event because the relevant governing body has approved them. I don't know that all they were approved by the ABC commissions, by the representatives at their big meeting, but each individual commission has to go through and approve them now. This one already, and the relevant commission here in Alberta already has. We know they have, so we know they're in play. Main event. Flyweight. Brandon Moreno, former flyweight champion, and Amir Albazi. I have gone back and forth a little bit on this one. Albazi's pretty darn good. I did not score the Kai Kara France fight for him. But other than that, he's on a, what, 1, 2, 3. He's on a 6-fight winning streak, 5 of them in the UFC. Submitted Malcolm Gordon, beat Jalgas Zhumagulov. Did I think he won that fight? That might be one of those that I kind of thought Zhumagulov got hosed on. Choked out Francisco Figueiredo, knocked out Alessandro Costa, and I don't remember how I scored the fight with Kai Kara France. It's a split decision over 5 rounds. I don't remember how I scored it. I'm just being honest with that one. But Brandon Moreno is a pretty big ask. Now, Moreno is on a 2-fight losing streak. In fairness, those are both split decisions. One was that absolute insane fight with Alexandre Pantoja, fight of the year for 2023, if memory serves. Mine, at least. I'm pretty sure I gave that fight of the year. How did that not? How did that not for 2023? Eh. Oh, you know what? Depending on which awards we're talking about, they might not have voted on that yet. Eh. But wonderful fight, if you haven't seen it. Crazy. Then fights to a split with Brandon Royval. That I scored that one for. I scored both of those fights against him. But the Royval fight, the Pantoja fight was like stupidly good. The Royval fight I thought was a little bit clearer for Royval, but this is an important fight for Moreno. Now, Moreno's only 30, but he's historically been a little bit up and down. When he's on, he's very on. He's just at times in the past struggled to maintain that fight over fight. I mean, he had a lot of hype coming in off of when he beat Figueiredo. When he beat Figueiredo the first time, like coming into their third fight together, just not quite sure what's up with him there. Fought very weirdly. Took a little bit to get going in the Kai Kara France fight. They were starting to swing towards Kara France, but they got the finish. This is a big step up for Albazi. I mean, I respect the win over Kai Kara France, but that was like June of 23, so that's well over a year. I'm going to lean towards Moreno here. He's just more proven. But if he can't get things dialed in and really... If he can't get things dialed in and consistent, Albazi absolutely can win this fight. Odds a little bit with Moreno. Yeah, that tracks. All right, co-main event. Women's flyweight, Erin Blanchfield and Rose Namajunas. Not a bad fight, actually. Blanchfield, coming off of that loss to Manon Fior, her first loss in the UFC. I think the first clean loss of her career. Her other loss was a split decision with Tracy Cortez. There was no dispute about the Fior fight. She just could not get almost anything going against that woman. Namajunas, on the other hand, has won her last two fights, but took a pretty decent step back in class. Because she lost the strawweight belt in one of the worst fights you'll ever see. Then didn't have almost anything from Manon Fior. Then fought Amanda Hebos and Tracy Cortez, and both of those women were a little bit out of their elements with Rose, especially over 5 rounds. Not that either of them had like terrible performances. I think Hebos, got a round or two? At least one. Real Cortez did. Yeah, Cortez at least one round. So, point there. Rose taking another step up at flyweight, taking a step back up at flyweight towards the top end of the division. Blanchfield's striking defense is just kind of a problem. I'm sure she's been working on it, but if she can get things to the ground, she is a handful and a half down there. But her methodology for getting it there is a little bit suspect at this point. Again, someone who knows what they're doing. And 3 rounds is not a lot of time to get to work. This isn't a 5 round. Oh, it might be. Okay. I'm going to give myself a little hedging of the bets here. 3 rounds I would favor Rose. 5 rounds I actually think I favor Blanchfield, believe it or not. I think a lot of Rose's game struggles to maintain cohesion and consistency over 5 rounds, and I think we've seen that play out. So I don't think we have a confirmation on that. It's expected to be 5 rounds. So that's kind of my hedging here. Blanchfield if it's 5, Rose if it's 3, and I'm going to list Blanchfield at the moment, but understand that I'm reserving the right for that one to change based on a few other things. I think the odds are slightly with Aaron. Yeah, very slightly. Okay. So that's where that is. Yeah, 5 rounds changes that one a little bit, if it is. I'll have to wait and see for confirmation on that one. Heavyweights are up next because Edmonton is guilty of something. And it's Derek Lewis and Janata Deniz because Edmonton is guilty of something. Lewis won his last fight, beat Rodrigo Nascimento. But he's 2-4 in his last 6, and this is the kind of guy he tends to beat, though. Deniz, 2-0 in the UFC, wins over Osman and Carl Williams. He's getting a massive step up here. I mean, neither of those guys is anywhere near as experienced or proven as Derek Lewis. Deniz is a little bit of the favorite. Lewis is 39, closing in on 40. He'll be 40 in February, so he's really closing in on it. It's heavyweight, so that's not as big a deal, but he's also got, 31, 41 fights? That's a lot, and he's been in the UFC for a long time. Deniz is only 8-0. He is 33. 2-0 in the UFC as mentioned. This is a weird one to me. I need to look up Deniz's fights again to double check a few things. I'm actually leaning Lewis at the moment. I reserve the right to change my mind on that one, but Denise is kind of going to fight the way Lewis likes to fight. And these are the kind of fights that Derek Lewis has been winning. Even as he is obviously not in his prime anymore. So I'm actually going to lean towards Lewis and reserve the right to change my mind on that one. Light heavyweights next, Caio Machado and Brenderson Ribeiro. Odds are with Machado. Machado is 8-3-1. 2-fight losing streak, both of them in the UFC, to Mick Parkin and Dontel. That Mays fight sucked. Yeah, he really struggled with Mays. But he's down to light heavyweight now, trying to get some life back into his career. Brenderson Ribeiro, 15-7, 2-fight losing streak, 0-2 in the UFC. Losses to Mingyong Zhang and Magomed Gaziasulov. Loser I have to imagine, goes home. Okay, so Machado's getting some shine here, being the guy cutting down to light heavyweight. You know what? That's as good a reason as any to pick somebody at light heavyweight these days. I'll go with Machado there. I'll trust the odds makers. Next up, middleweight, Dustin Stoltzfus and Marc-Andre Barrio. Barrio having a little bit of a... Had a little bit of a renaissance going and then lost his last two. A split decision to Chris Curtis that I agree he lost. Weird fight. First 2 rounds, not a lot. Third round, they kind of came alive, and that was also the round Chris Curtis most clearly won. They got knocked out by Joe Pyfer his last time out. That was back in June. Yeah, 0-2 this year. Stoltzfus, rough UFC run thus far. 2-5. Bruno Ferreira hit him with that spinning back. He was actually doing well against Ferreira before the spinning back elbow. He beat Punahele Soriano before that. He got beat by Abus. Barrio's only 34, but man, he's taken a lot of abuse. And again, Stoltzfus has not been especially impressive. Yeah, sure, let's go Barrio. But that is... welterweight, Mike Malott and Trevin Giles. Mike Malott, who had beaten the brakes off of Neil Magny and then just fell apart with mere seconds left to go in the first round. Trevin Giles. Giles has some ability, but he has struggled to put it together. Feels like a get-well fight from Malott here a little bit. And that's kind of how I see that one going. But man, if he falls apart again, we just kind of have to wash our hands of him. Okay, next up, Ariane De Silva and Jasmine Jasdavicius. Jasdavicius, 2-fight winning streak. Wins over Priscilla Cachoeira and Fatima Klein. De Silva, Lipsky, former Lipsky, now De Silva, okay. Lost to Karine Silva her last time out. Had a 3-fight winning streak going before that. It's a size difference, I think, in favor of Jasdavicius. Something happened to that other fight, or did it just get... Or I just not got to it yet. I didn't skip it, did I? I did. Okay, my mistake. Before getting to that one, back up a hair. Ayman Zahabi and Pedro Munoz on your preliminary main event. That's a pretty good fight. Zahabi's on a 4-fight winning streak. That fight with Javid Basharat was just weird. Javid just could not get anything going. Munoz, been around for a bit, 38 years old at bantamweight. 2-fight losing streak. Granted, Marlon Vera, Kyler Phillips. Slightly mitigating, but this might be one of the last times I lean towards Munoz. I need odds are slightly with Munoz. Yeah, they're about where I am. Okay, I'm gonna go with Munoz. But if Zahabi's finally kind of getting things really cooking, he is 36, and he's had some layoffs at times. If he's really getting things cooking and like harmonizing, he might be able to, not a title run, but actually like start putting things together. We'll find out against Munoz. Anyway, moving on. Jazz Davicius and the former Lipski, so De Silva. Jazz Davicius, 5'7", 68 inches of reach. Lipski an inch shorter and an inch shorter in both dimensions. Wait, did I say she was 5'7" or 5'8"? Because Lipski's or Silva's 5'6". 5'7", yeah. So 1 inch each way. De Silva's good, but I don't know. Jazz Davicius is the kind of fighter that seems to give her problems. Yeah, I'm gonna go with Jazz Davicius. Lipski has just struggled with people who are able to clinch her consistently and make her wrestle a lot. And Jazz Davicius does that a fair bit. Bantamweight, good fight here actually. Charles Jourdain and Victor Henry. Jourdain, 2-fight losing streak. Sean Woodson, a split decision. I agree that Woodson won that fight. And then got knocked out by Jean Silva. Silva missed weight, but that's not the only reason he lost that fight. Victor Henry is just a tough guy, good pace. Got a good win over Ronnie Yaya's last time out. I think pretty highly of Henry. Not that I don't like Jourdain, but I actually think I'm going to go with Henry here. He might have a bit of a hard time finding Jourdain, but I feel like Jourdain's been slipping a little bit lately. I don't know that I have enough evidence to back up that assumption, but that's kind of the feeling. Let's see. Featherweights next, Jack Shore and Yusuf Zalal. Shore, coming off of that doctor stoppage against Joe Anderson Brito, and I think that was fair. His only losses are to Ricky Simone in the aforementioned Brito fight. Beat Makwan Amirkhani, Timur Valiev. He's had a good run through the UFC thus far. Zalal recently got back to the UFC and beat Billy Quarantillo and Jarno Aarons. Seems like he used that time. He might have been one of those guys who got to the UFC too early, lost, got cut, rebuilt himself, and is now kind of where he should have been. Now is the level that you'd like to be at when you debut in the UFC, not have to fight your way back to it. The odds like Zalal a fair bit. There's some physical dimension to this. That I am missing here. Not that I don't think that's... Zalal is 5'10", 72-inch reach. Factory X has been real good to him. 5'8", 71 inches for... yeah, that's it. Giving up that much reach to Zalal is a problem. Yeah. We'll go with Zalal. Okay, Alexander Romanov. Two heavyweight fights because Edmonton is guilty of something. Alexander Romanov versus Rodrigo Nascimento. This fight is probably going to suck. Romanov is 1-3 in his last four. His gas tank has been called into serious question. He's got good ground and pound, and he's dangerous for 5 minutes. But if he's on his back, man, Jelton Almeida got him out of there quickly. Volkov got him out of there quickly. Then again, Nascimento had a pretty decent winning streak going before I ran into Derek Lewis his last time out. Odds are very close. They actually lean towards Nascimento. I can see that. Romanov's just not been doing it lately. I'll go with Nascimento. All right, I'm being a coward and going with favorites here. It feels like. Okay, at bantamweight, Shere Sidi and Garrett Armfield. Okay, so Sidi, 10-2. Lost his UFC debut to Ramon Tavares, split decision back in January. Okay. Armfield, 10-4, 2-2 in the UFC. Recently lost to Brady Heastand. Just got out wrestled by him. Okay. Armfield's the slightly more known quantity. I imagine that's where I'm going to go. I don't know. Then again, he did not look all that great against Heastand. What are the odds? Odds with Saidi. This is one of those I'll trust the odds makers on. So there's that. Okay. Bantamweight again. Chad Anheliger and Cody Gibson. Gibson beat Brian Kelleher his last time out. Okay. Lost two before that. Brad Katona, Miles Johns. Yeah, that all kind of tracks. And Helliger's had a bit of a rough stretch in the UFC, if memory serves. 13-7 overall. Only 2-2 in the UFC. I know why. Yeah, because his losses have been his wins have been over guys who like almost immediately washed out, and his wins have been less than stellar. This is slightly sentimental on my end, but I think I'm gonna go with Gibson. If Gibson can't win this fight, yeah, that's a real bad sign. And kicking everything off, Ivana Petrovich and Jamie Lynn Horth at women's flyweight. So Horth, 6-1, 1-1 in the UFC. Won her UFC debut against Haley Cowan. Dropped a decision to Veronica Hardy. That was split, but I recall scoring that for Hardy. Petrovich, 7-1. 1-1 in the UFC. Lost her debut to Luana Carolina. Then beat Liang Na her last time out. That's a tough one, actually. The odds... Where are the odds on this one? Odds are with Horth. Horth Wessels. Did she get married? I'm not typing out Horth Wessels. She's hyphenating. I'm not doing it. I'm actually going to go with Petrovich. There's usually a few Canadians that lose to kind of just piss the crowd off, and that feels like one of the ones that might do that. So that's where we are. Saturday, okay, full disclosure. I don't know if I'll be on time for the first prelim or so for this one. I have a thing on Saturday, and frustratingly, I am unsure of the timing on when it will end. So I'm going to make sure I let my editor know as well, of course, but that's kind of. I should be there for the vast majority of that card. If I do miss, it won't be more than the first. I will almost certainly not miss more than the first two prelims. But that thing starts at 9 in the morning, and this event starts at 3. So if my thing takes 9, so what, 10, 11, 12, 1, 1 is 4 hours, 2, it shouldn't take 5 hours. It really, really shouldn't. And I will be deeply, profoundly frustrated if it does, but one of those things that's out of my control. So if I miss the first couple of fights, I just do, and I apologize, and I will be there for the vast majority of this card. But MMAZone411mania.com, stop on by, say hello. I always appreciate that from you guys. All right. Okay, let's move on to some bits of news. What do we got? So let's talk about a few things from Dana White having some press time. A few highlights, if you don't mind. The one that I think annoyed me, because it's just petty and stupid. He has said that Francis Ngannou is a bad person and he will never be in business with him again, and that's only why you allegedly offered him the most money that anyone's ever been paid in the UFC. And Francis is all about the money, but that's why he went elsewhere. But he also could have made more money if he'd stuck here with us. And it is crap. It is nothing but crap. It is sad and more than a little bit pathetic. I also just have to say, some of the media around this event, I'm going to overuse the word pathetic, but it was just pathetic. You had someone come up to the mic and say to Dana, like, I don't have a question, I just wanted to bow down and let you know that your work for the sport will be remembered for hundreds of years, and this obsequious crap. And someone else get on the mic and say, I was critical of Power Slap, but then I went to one of the events, and now my opinion has completely changed, and I'm sure that your access to further UFC events is not at all contingent upon your being deferential to that unbearably stupid circus. And then for Dana to go on the podcast circuit and be like, people hate the media. My man, I'm not saying there's not problems with mainstream media outlets. There are. There really are. And if you can't see that, I can't help you. But understand that you have removed actual journalists and the process of journalism from the coverage of MMA very deliberately. So now all you do is podcast circuits, and the people asking questions are jackasses at like clown fart on TikTok. That's what you've reduced this to. So you did this, and it's more than a little bit pathetic. And the fact that 90% of the MMA news ecosystem is now so-and-so said something. Like, you're farming social media for engagement posts is all you're doing, and it sucks. And I'm aware that I work for a website that is an aggregator. And there's a place for aggregation, but if that's all you have, you don't have anything. And MMA journalism has been routinely and consistently diminished or excised from the UFC space because they don't like it. They are still of the opinion that journalism just means being good PR. And that's not what it is. And the fact that that's all you're allowing in is this sad cavalcade of ugh, just unbearably pathetic soundbite chasing it people is a little bit disgusting and more than a little bit disheartening about the future of the sport. Also, Dana White did mention that Umar Nurmagomedov is almost certainly next for Merab Dvalishvili. Good. There was only a question about this because Merab started saying, no, I don't want to fight Umar. I think Sean O'Malley deserves a rematch. Blah, 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 blah. Stupid stuff, stupid stuff, stupid stuff. It should be Umar. This is not up for debate as far as I'm concerned. Um, I mean, I think Umar did sign for a fight recently. But just Merab making that a headache when there's no reason for it to be a headache. For a guy that got as much cheering as he did when he beat O'Malley to then turn around and now start like burning through that goodwill very, very quickly is an odd choice. All right. That's kind of what I got as far as news. So let me check the old X machine. See if anything crazy is broken in the MMA space, apart from Dana White being at a Trump rally. But hey, he doesn't like to bring. Uh, I don't even care that Dana goes to a Trump rally and speaks at it. You know, believe it or not, I really don't. I wouldn't care if he went and did the same for Kamala Harris. I, I I don't care in the sense that he is an individual. He is more than welcome to endorse either major candidate for the presidency of the United States. Heck, he could endorse a third-party candidate as long as it's not some genuine whack job. And I won't care because this is America and this is one of the things you can do. And I am not one of these people who finds either major political candidate to be outside the bounds of I don't know, outside the bounds of the norm at this point. I mean, the norm has shifted, but I know way too many people on both sides of the aisle losing their freaking minds, thinking that Donald Trump is going to start throwing all of his political enemies in jail as soon as he gets into office, or that Kamala Harris will do the same because, well, she's been slightly party to that under the Biden administration, but that's a whole other conversation. And it's not like Trump's record as president is sterling. It's got some blemishes. Can think of a few, right? But I don't think either of them is the Antichrist. I just don't. They're just politicians, and most politicians suck. But I don't think either of them are going to like meaningfully move us closer to Armageddon. Well, let me rephrase. I don't think either of them is going to meaningfully move us closer to Armageddon sooner than the other one. Wanted to qualify that just a little bit there. But my gripe is the slightly hypocritical nature of Dana going, we don't do politics here in the UFC. Meanwhile, um, I mean, you do. You show Trump on the broadcast. You give him his own walkout. And look, maybe they do the same thing for Kamala Harris or Joe Biden if either of them were going to show up. That is entirely possible. They haven't, so I don't know. But when you're doing that kind of thing, you're clearly not separating. And you also, somewhat in fairness, they do tend to let fighters speak their mind after those. But even that act means politics can come into play. But you just like to pretend you're apolitical as a entity and as a broadcast because you think it scores you more points with your audience. And it does. It really does. But it's, like most things Dana White says, kind of a lie. All right. Off my soapbox there. So, checking the X machine. Let's see what we got. Nope. Nothing new there. Well, again, nothing MMA related, at least. Well, briefly, I suppose Robert Whittaker's kind of said, jaw's fine, teeth got pushed in, it's an old injury, good excuse to get him fixed. So, if he's still banging that drum, I'll take him at his word, I suppose. That's not just a new fracture of the jaw, but uh, they look like they're still anchored to something. So I don't know what that is, but it's he knows what's up. So if that's adjacent to something he's been dealing with for a while, then dude, get your teeth fixed. That's the kind of thing that you don't want to deal with at all later in life. And I say that as a guy who a few years ago had a lot of dental work done. It was a giant headache. All right. But anyway, plugs. Monday on Damn You Hollywood, we will be talking about Venom: The Last Dance. I have not seen it yet, but will before review it. I'm not looking forward to it. I don't have hopes for it at all, but we'll see. Earlier today, I covered NXT's Halloween Havoc. Meh. Was a meh show. Let's see. This week, I already mentioned, but the usual coverage, WWE SmackDown on Friday. UFC event on Saturday, as much of it as I can, and I imagine it'll be the vast majority of it, so... It should be the vast majority of it, but we'll find out. That's going to be what it's going to be. As I mentioned, that is out of my control completely, so we'll find out. All right. Yeah, that's it for me. I don't have another podcast this week, do I? I think it's not until next week. Yeah. No, actually, it's okay. Still a little bit of time. I don't have anything weird going on for a while yet. So yeah, just Venom, 9 p.m. Eastern on the W2M network on Damn You Hollywood. Give it a listen if you're so inclined. That's it. That's it for me for this week. Thank you all again for listening. Until next time, continue to be well, be safe, and behave.